Well, today I want to show you how easy it is to make these beautiful embroidered pieces. And it's so easy using punch needle. There are just a few things you need to follow, and I showed these to my members and they absolutely love them. I've been making these a long time. I've made loads of different sorts and there's like a little kind of teddy bear rug, reputed cat, dragon. Today I'm going to show you how to do the leaves and flowers, how to do the unicorn, and how to do a little coaster like this of an emoji. I'm going to be using different methods. So for this one I used rat tail, which is this silky stuff, and that's only the 1mm. I don't like the thicker one, and it is a little bit harder, so I would suggest you start with something like this. This I used wool, and this I used wool, but for the purpose of this one I'm actually going to be using embroidery thread. Now before you get started, you need to make sure you've got your punch tool needle ready. Now I've got quite a selection of them here, but what is really important is that you get the right one for the size of the wool, because the wool needs to flow through it really easily, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. My advice would be to start with is buy yourself one of the cheap kits that are online. I'll link a couple below, because then you're guaranteed to get the right wool for the right tool. I also have this tool here, and you can alter the length. And now by altering the length on the needle here, see? I entertain myself. I don't know who else I'm trying to entertain. You can get a deeper loop. So let me show you. So at the end you get a loop like this. Now don't worry about it coming out the material, because if you're using the right material for the thickness of the wool, then it will stay where it's put. But I always finish mine off anyway with a backing like this. I'm going to be using monk's cloth for the first two, and I've got my designs here. These were just designs I found on the Cricut. I typed in embroidery designs and these come up. Again, monk's cloth is really easy and cheap. It's a really loose weave. So your needle will actually penetrate this like that, and it won't do any damage. So if you go wrong like that and you think, oh no, that's not where I want to put it, you just rub it underneath with your finger and it will absolutely almost disappear. So no damage, because the weave of the cloth moves to one side, and then when it goes back into position it grips that really tightly. So I'm going to start with the leaves one. It's going to fit in that loop here, and I'm all self-taught on this. It's not something, you know, I've learned, so there's probably lots of different ways of doing this. I make sure that I've got enough monk's cloth to go around what I'm doing. Again, I will link this in the description below, but if you buy a kit it all comes with it. Okay, so I've got enough monk's cloth. Now monk's cloth is a real pain for fraying, and I don't want it to fray. So how I'd stop that is I just take a bit of painter's tape like that, stick that down over my edge that I've just cut, and then turn it over on itself, and that will stop that piece from fraying. And honestly, it makes so much easier to do it like this. Now some punch needle, you have a choice. You can either have the loops showing like I've got on that one or that one. They're the loops, so the weave is on the other side. I think that comes out quite cute. Or for instance on the unicorn I've got the actual stitch showing, and it's your choice depending on what you want to do. And the same for the leaves. So that would be the loop. I would just trim them down. Once you've got your edges taped off like that, then all you need to do is trace your little picture onto here. Now I use a light box like this one. It cost me it was very cheap. I will link this again in the description, and that shows you through the picture really well. But if you haven't got a light box, then just pop your picture and your piece of monk's cloth over a window or another light source, and then you should be fine. It will show up. And then I use a Sharpie, and all I do is go round and trace it. Now you might be artistic enough to actually just draw it freehand, which is lovely. I'm not, as you know. I never consider myself to be an artist. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to trace these both out. I'll be doing the unicorn in exactly the same way, and then I'll show you how to carry on from there. So this is the next really important step as well before you get started. Take the smaller ring like this from your embroidery hoop and drape your fabric over it. Then take your larger ring and push that over it. You might need to undo it like I am to give yourself a bit more space. There we go. So we've got that on there. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to tighten that up a little bit, because you need this fabric to be as tight on here as possible. As you can see at the moment, it's still quite loose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that through like that and tighten that up. And now you can see that is so much tighter than it was. Using a punch needle on loose fabric is really hard work. Where using punch needle on really tight fabric, it just slips in like a knife through soft butter. So what we've got now is that much tighter, and that'll make it far easier to do. Next thing I'm going to do is get my needle that I'm going to use for this. Now you can get, like I said, needles in different lengths. If you've got a different length needle, the longer the needle, the longer the loop at the back here. So this bit here. So the longer this loop is. Now for the leaves, which is the first one I'm going to do because that is a really good beginner's one, then I don't need too long a loop, and my needle comes with this little loop guard on it, so I can have a longer loop or I can have a shorter loop. Some needles are adjustable. There's a lot of different things that you can do for these that will give you different size loops at the back, and the more familiar you get with it, the more you'll think, I need a short loop for this one, I need a longer loop for this one. You know, I want a quite short loop for this one, so I didn't have such a long needle. Now for me, I'm using wool for this first one, and I always start off with the smallest bits, and then I do the outline if there's an outline, and then I fill it in afterwards. Threading your needle is easy, but it's important to make sure that you get it right. So what you want to do is thread your needle through the needle like this. Now they come with these needle threaders, and you'd be lost without them. So pop that up there like that till it comes out at the end. Pop your wool in there, pull it through, and then you've got it nearly threaded. The next thing to do is in the little hole here, push your needle threader through that little hole like that and pull it through there. So it's now threaded through there, and I don't like to have too long a strand, normally about that much coming off it. The other really important thing is you must have slack in your wool. If you don't have slack in your wool, your stitches won't work. So what I do is I always have it going over my hand, because if not I end up resting on it, and I'll quickly show you what I mean. So on here, if I was doing an outline, I'd push that through, bring it back up, push that through, bring it back up, push that through, bring it back up like that. We've got nice flat stitches that are full the other side as well, as you can see. If you've got too much tension on your wool, so I'll put my hand on my wool, then what happens is your needle stops making the stitches, or it will make a stitch that's really long like that, then a couple more at work, and then again it won't make stitches, so you end up having to undo that. And this is what I mean about the monk's cloth. Look where we've done all that. If we just rub over the bottom of that now, all those little gaps should fill, and once this contracts around your wool, honestly it holds in really tightly. And when you're using the punch needle, you have to keep your needle in contact with the material all the time. So I'll put my needle through, I'll then pull my thread through like that. You lift the needle, do the size stitch you want, and keep your needle in contact with the cloth that you're punching. If not, what happens is this. You get loose stitches, look. You'll still get a bit of a loop at the back, but you'll get these really big loop stitches, which are no good. So if you come apart, just pull your thread like that, keep it on the material at all times. And this goes for whatever cord you're using. The other thing that's really important is this must not be in any way hindered. It must run through there really smoothly, because if not it won't work. And that's why it's important to get the right size needle for the right size thread. And buying a kit will really help you. I've got lots of different size needles, but I don't want to be punching. If I had a really thick wool, then I would probably use this needle here, which I can adjust the length for, which is ideal if you want to hand punch a rug or something like that. But look at the size of that needle in comparison to that one. This would be for a really thick thread. So if I was using this, this is going to make really big holes in there. So if you're not using something like monk's cloth and you're using cotton, that is going to absolutely destroy that. But larger, thicker thread or wool, say for instance something like this, would not run through this finer needle. So as I said, I do my smaller bits first. So I'm going to start here, pull my thread through under here, shorten that off. Don't need to be wasting all that thread. And then my material's nice and tight. I can just go round this center like this, not allowing my needle to come off the actual piece, and then I've done that center bit, and then I can just fill it in. The other thing is you need your needle and your thread to be following in the same direction all the time. So the open part of your needle, which is this bit here, needs to be facing forward at all times, or towards where you're stitching, and you will just automatically in the end just keep turning it until you're happy. Once you're finished, all I do is push my needle through, pull that down like that, and cut that off. And then I'm ready. And that won't come out. You know, that is quite secure in there, look. And that's full. And then I can move over to my next bit. pushing away. I usually watch something on television or listen to some music while I'm doing this. I find it so relaxing. Again, I'm pulling out. My needle is always facing the right way. I'm slightly turning it as I'm going round and filling this in. And there, I'm happy with the way that's filled in. And now we've got the centre. Look how quickly it comes on. It comes on really quick. I will do this whole thing in about 20 minutes, probably. What I'm going to do is finish off doing my little lines on here, which are these parts of the flower. And then I'll show you how I'm going to do the outline. I also use a different type of stitch for the leaves. And I'll show you how to do that. And then we'll move on to a different kind of thread. So once you've got your little bits in, then that is where I start to do the outline. And for the outline of this, I'm using this dark blue colour. Again, always having your needle facing the right way. I've tucked it right up close to those black stitches. And now I'm going to pull that through. Got plenty of slack, even though my arm was on it. I'm going to tuck that right up close to those black stitches. Pull my thread through. And now I've got plenty of slack on my wool, keeping my needle in the same position all the time. So the actual needle, this part of the needle is always facing away from the stitch that you want to use, twisting it as I need to. And this is just a really cheap acrylic wool I'm using here. I'll link that in the description below because I think I got 14 balls for something really cheap. And I'm trying to do an even distance between the stitches. I don't always, and I'm not going to lose any sleep over it because it really doesn't make it look too much different. Now, when you start to get a lot of threads on the back here, it can be quite annoying then to pull your threads through because you're never sure which one you're pulling through. So all you need to do is, like I'm doing, go round periodically and trim those off. So there's your first outline. And now I'm going to go round and do all the outlines in exactly the same way. So now we've got those outlines done, what I'm going to do is these darker green bits. And I'll do those in exactly the same way, apart from, as I go round these bits, I'm going to fill in the gaps. And all I'll be doing for that is running backwards and forwards until the gaps are filled in. When you're filling in, what's important is that you get your next stitch to the fill-in as close to your previous stitch as you can. So as you can see, I'm kind of just slightly nudging those stitches to one side before I put the next one in. Then you get it really nicely packed in. Again, going round like this, nudge that stitch out of the way slightly. Then I'm getting those stitches really close to that previous stitch. Now you can brick these stitches, so if you want to, so you kind of got like a brick pattern to them. I do that sometimes and I don't do it, so it depends what I'm actually doing and whether I think about it. But that way you'll get a really nice tight fill in. You won't see any of the monk's cloth material underneath. And move your ring around as well if you need to get the stitches in the right place. So there we go, so that bit's done. I'll finish off doing my outlines and then I'll show you how I'm going to fill that in. Well, now I've got those filled in, and I did those in exactly the same way as I did those. It didn't take very long at all. What I'm going to do is the ones for the leaves. So I've got a light green here, and I'm going to use a different stitch for this. So what I'm going to do is go really close to the edge of the leaf where I've got the outline, and then I'm bringing that stitch right the way across to there, turning my hoop and bringing it back beside it to there. So it's making it a long stitch, and then I'll just keep doing that all the way across, and it gives more of a texture to the piece like that. Keep going beside it right up until the edge like that. And then once you've done the whole leaf, you can finish it off exactly how you did the previous stitches. Remember always to keep your needle very close, touching the monk's cloth, because you don't want these loops to be too high and you don't want them to be too loose. And then once you've done all your leaves, then your piece is finished. Then I'll show you how to use the rat towel or the satin material. So that's all finished now. It didn't take long to do. That took me just over 3/4 of an hour, and that includes stopping and filming as well. It's come out really, really pretty. Now you can just carry on with the punching all the way round and do a background on it, similar to what I did with this one with white. But it's entirely up to you. You can hang it on the wall like that, or you can put it in a frame, or whatever you want to do with it. Regarding the satin cord, now this is more difficult to actually use in a punch needle. It's harder. It just feels harder when you're using it, but it can be done. Again, you want to make sure that you've got the right size needle, and you just use it in exactly the same way as you would the wool. I wouldn't start with this possible, I would start with wool, because wool is really easy to pull through and push. But I love the effect that this gives. Now with this one, I do an outline first. As you can see here, I did the black outline around everything and then just filled in with multiple colours all the way through. So again, like this, I tend to try and do the same size stitches all the way around, because I think that gives it a really nice effect. And again, it's important to make sure that your monk's cloth is really tight on your ring. So once you've got your actual silk thread in there, then you can just fill it out as normal, as we did the other leaf. Just choose your colours that you want out your silk thread and then fill it in, and then it will end up looking like that. And for this one, what I'm using is embroidery floss. Now you can get this really cheaply. I buy packs of it, and I'm using a much smaller needle. I'm still doing it on the monk's cloth, and I'm doing it in exactly the same way, but I'm using a smaller needle and I'm using slightly smaller stitches as I'm going round, and this will give you a different effect at the end. Now I've not done a long loop on this because I don't need a long loop, but it will work. But as long as you've got your material nice and tight, then it will go really easily. Now this has got an ombre effect to it, this floss, and I particularly like that. You can go quite quickly with this, as long as you're not dragging your needle too far, and you're making sure that when you plunge your needle, you plunge in your needle fully to the depth that you've got it set. So that way you'll get consistent loops. And again, your stitches need to be really close, and when I'm using floss, I do try and brick it so it goes across the previous stitch, not down the same hole or in the same position. So there we go, I finished that one off, and with the floss it looks quite nice on that side, but it's this side that we want to concentrate on for this one. We can take that off there like that. See what I mean about this fraying? I didn't put the tape around the edge of that one. And now what I'm going to do with a pair of scissors is I'm going to go around and cut these loops, trim them up so they're a little bit fluffy. Now, when I did the outline of this here in this colour, I actually altered the needle so it was a little bit longer, so then it gives longer loops. Once it gives longer loops, you get more of a 3D effect with it. So all I'm doing is going around, just trimming off the very tops of these loops. And it works much better, I find, with wool and this embroidery floss than it does with the silk doing this technique. So there we go, that one's finished now. I just could tidy that up a little bit more. What I've done now is left the loops in the middle where the heart is, and then trimmed all this up, and it looks really nice. I'll show you a couple of other ones where I've done that. So that again was the cat. I trimmed that one up, and again here I did that one, and that was with the loops and wool, and I trimmed that up. So it's a really easy hobby. It's great fun, and you can get a lot done in quite a short time. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this. I think they've come out really well. There's some different ones to show you as well. Check out the video I've got coming up next. I think you'll really love that one. Boot that like button, hit that subscribe button, but most of all, enjoy your crafting. Take care. Bye.